Breakfast with Cobb Colvin.
Trickstar Radio.
Right then, 16 minutes past 8, we're live on Trickstar Radio, and the wonderful Ella joins us this morning. How are you doing?
I'm well, thank you.
Good, thanks for joining us. Obviously, what I want to talk about here, obviously it's a route that kind of a lot of people find themselves in, and I feel the way you've kind of done it is actually quite a unique way of doing things. So we want to kind of look through, like, obviously you're primarily a writer. So I want to look at how did you first sort of find that as your, I don't want to say calling, but how did you first find that as like a real interest?
Oh, that's a really good question. Ever since I was a child, I wanted to be a writer. That changed paths a lot. So when I was a kid, when I was a kid, I wanted to be a singer, a pop star, as most kids do. I think that was just a phase that everyone has. Yeah, I mean, the thing is, I've always been obsessed with music. I've always loved music, and when I was younger, I wanted to be a pop star. And I have this memory of, for example, my dad was really into music. So a lot of my music taste, like the old, especially like the old rock and roll folky stuff, comes from my dad. And he was a really big fan of Jimi Hendrix. He said that Jimi Hendrix wrote all of these songs, and I said, I bet I could write as many songs as Jimi Hendrix, and my dad said no. So I went into my room and I got all of these different sheets of coloured paper and a crayon, and I started writing songs, like obviously not real songs, but songs that were like, my unicorn is all these colours, and rainbows are this, and the sun is yellow. And I'd like, every time I wrote a song, I would go into the living room and I would place the song in front of my dad with like a scowl on my face going, is this enough yet? And my dad would look at me and go, nope. And I'd like go back into my room, write another song, and I remember it so clearly, being so livid that I must write as many songs. So that's how it started. And then I was an avid reader as a kid, and I always wrote stories, and I had a really vivid imagination, which I still do, which is both a blessing and a curse, believe me. And I wanted to be an author. Writing was always like my favourite subject in school. It was always the thing that I was very good at. However, I let myself it went away with me a little bit too much as well. Like, it could also be very much my vice, my curse, like I said before, I guess, like where I think I almost failed my A-levels because I went on this whole tangent and I wrote this whole essay about what I thought about The Great Gatsby and all the symbolism in it, which was not the question that they asked me. So I had to retake that one. And then when I was a teenager, I started getting really involved in politics. And when I got involved in politics, I realised I wanted to be a journalist. So I went and studied politics because I wanted to be a political journalist. Got very involved in campaigning and activism. But alongside that as well, I was also writing a lot about music, because music still had a really, really, really firm place in my heart. And I started writing about music reviewing music when I was about 16, 17. And was this just like on a sort of thing of just uploading to your own blog, or were you working for specific people? Or? I was working for, I think when I was like 16, 17, I started writing for like some little online magazines that like no one will have ever heard of, basically, but still a platform. But a platform, yes. Not. I mean, I had a blog as well. I had a political blog, but I never had a music blog. But I was really lucky that I managed to write. I think when I moved to London, and I started writing for this magazine called Stencil Mag, and I started writing about hardcore music and metal music, and I wasn't that into metal at the time, but I was like, sure, I'll write about metal, and just like ended up listening to loads of hardcore and metal like randomly. So that was like what I listened to for a while, just because I had to write about it. So I was like, guess this is my life now.
I'm a metal writer.
I now love metal, which I do like a bit of metal still. And then so that kind of ran parallel with each other, where I got really, really into music writing, and one thing bounced off another, and I started writing for all these different magazines. I started writing a lot about music, but at the same time I was studying politics and very interested in activism and politics. And then like the event stuff kind of took a role after that, because I started working for a charity that got young people engaged in politics, and I helped them run a lot of events. And then through music journalism, I was hitting up a lot of festivals and doing a lot of events in that way. Not in the same like kind of event management style, but I was very used to being on the road and working at events and sitting in a cabin with a laptop, and all that kind of stuff.
Would you say that's like your ideal environment then?
Yeah,
to be kind of away, but still be away, so you're away almost from like the day-to-day hustle and bustle, but you are still in a position where you can sit down and focus.
Do you know what? I think you're right. I think my favourite environment is a makeshift cabin on site somewhere in the field, and that be like you're almost like the space of solitude where you can kind of go, right, I've got like a few hours here, I can zone in. Yeah, I mean, it's weird that you say solitude, because solitude is definitely not the right word for that, because there's people coming in and out asking you stuff, and like there's most of the time if you're at a festival site, there is like you can just hear the bass going on in the background.
It's a constant rattle.
But I guess it's my form of my calm.
Yeah.
Now, like,
well, I think calm often comes from almost familiarity.
Yeah.
A lot of the time it comes from that thing of, I know this environment, I'm calm here because I know exactly how this environment works. Which so for a lot of people, calm would be, for instance, if you owned a club, your calm would be in the room in the office above the club. That's where you're calm. You could just go home, but no, this is where I feel comfortable in this space. If you're like a lot of landlords, for instance, like living above the pubs they work in, because they understand that's their comfortable space, if you know what I mean. So I think it does kind of come from familiarity as much as peace and quiet.
Yeah, but also like I think when I'm in that environment, my brain works so well in that environment.
Well, it's still it's a semi-creative environment, regardless. I think, just because not in the air, but it's like you've got a lot of like things going on around you that are influencing you. Your surroundings are likely to be different every time you go there, but still in that familiar sort of setting. But the actual look of things is going to be different each and every time.
Yeah, definitely.
So you are almost like it's like being in a familiar space, but also being inspired by the fact it's slightly different as well.
Do you know what? It's so interesting that you say that. That's so right, because it's like no matter what festival you're at, what event is going on, there will always be a makeshift cabin, there will always be a trestle table, there will always be a bunch of radios charging next to you. Like that is like a constant.
It's there. It's almost like you change the backdrop. It's like playing Habbo Hotel or something and just changing the backdrop every single time, but the same like fundamentals are there every single time.
Exactly.
So obviously you're now in a position where you are kind of writing. Is it right to say you're writing freelance? Is that the sort of best thing to say?
Yeah, I am a freelance writer. Most of it at the moment is poetry. So I made a kind of shift probably about 4 years ago now. I was still writing articles. I still write articles now occasionally, but nowhere near as much as I used to, where I was working as a writer and a content writer and a freelance journalist, and I was most writers, actually I think all writers will tell you that to be a real writer, I think you've got to have a love-hate relationship with writing. We were talking about deadlines earlier. Like my relationship with deadlines is very tumultuous. We don't get on. Yeah. It's like a mother and teenage daughter fighting constantly, or like siblings. Although the power play relationship in that is not correct, I would say like a mother and daughter, because deadlines rule me. And I loved writing about music, especially if I got to write a really cool feature on something that I was really interested about. I really loved it, and I actually studied news reporting as well at the Press Association, and that kind of made me fall out of love with journalism a little bit, because they were all talking about the Sun and the Daily Mail and how to write a news report and all of this stuff that I believe to be kind of like fundamentally wrong with the way that we report
on like a moral level. Yeah, of course.
So that was like a wake up call, I think, to like, if I wanted to be a news reporter, if I wanted to work for a paper, this was the kind of stuff I was going to have to bite my tongue with, and I just kind of wasn't willing to accept that. So after that I moved much more into the music side, and I also found poetry, specifically spoken word, and I found a load of spoken word artists who I really, really loved and appreciated, and it really opened my eyes as to what poetry could be.
Yeah.
And I think specifically for me, especially coming from someone who's loved music their whole life, never really wanted to be a musician, but always had like an element of performance in them, but wanted to be a writer, finding spoken word was like everything just kind of mixed into one, and I was like, this is it. This is the thing that I've wanted.
And then you ended up in a position where now this is what you're doing, essentially.
Yeah, now I get paid to write poetry. It's quite insane.
It's amazing. Right, we're going to get more into poetry specifically in just a second. We are going to jump into our track of the week next. Are you a fan of Coffee?
Oh, I love Coffee.
Yeah, her brand new single is our new track of the week, so we're going to jump into this one next. This one is a track entitled W, which is I can't say W, but when I see the letter W, I just want to go W, not W.
Really?
Yeah, which is bizarre. Because I don't know why I do that. Anyway, 27 minutes past 8 here, Trickstar Radio, we're live in the building with Ella Sadie.
Waking up Brighton.
Breakfast with Cobb Colville.